Welcome to the gold standard, Making Millions with Malia, the place to be for conscious CEOs and light leaders who know that they have an enormous mission that requires millions to fuel it. I am your host, Jennifer Longmore, Clear Channel for Mother Malia, along with being a long-standing 8-figure CEO, investor, and board advisor who is committed to creating as many conscious millionaires as I can in this lifetime, and to debunk the broke healer paradigm that tells you it is not benevolent to make millions doing spirit-led work. We are in the midst of individual and collective ascension, and as we ascend, so must the way that we do business and money as light leaders. That is what this show is all about. So tune in now and find out why we are ranked in the top 5% of global podcasts and why savvy CEOs just like you binge our show each week and share it as a high-value resource with their communities. Now let's dive into today's Making Millions broadcast. Welcome back, everyone, to the Gold Standard Podcast, Making Millions with Mother Malia. I am Mother Malia, of course, and we are finishing up this round of how trauma has helped you make a certain amount of gold and how to then alchemize the trauma into greater amounts of gold once it is dissolved. So today we are going to speak about the fourth main trauma response, which is freeze. And freeze is an interesting one, or seize, depending on, well, I suppose some will say that freeze turns into seize when we don't de-thaw things, but we'll just group it into one as freeze and seize. You know, it is interesting because when you were younger, you can have either acute trauma that is just, one event, I shall say, but it is so life-changing, it is so traumatic in whatever way that it is, that it can keep you frozen in that moment. Of course, life moves on and you move on, but there will be a significant part of you and your spirit, I will say, that is frozen in that time. So it can be things that are accidents. It can be, if you go snowboarding, I'll say as an example, you have a significant tumble and you perhaps have a significant injury that affects the way your body moves for life. Perhaps it creates some paralysis. Perhaps it creates a serious head injury that changes the trajectory of your life. There can be a variety of things. Or perhaps, if you were on a track to be some sort of athlete and then you break a bone to the point that you just won't be able to do a certain sport anymore, things like that. And others might judge that and say, oh, get over it, or it was an accident or whatever. It doesn't matter. It was a trauma. It was a trauma to the body. It was a trauma to perhaps your identity and, even how people might have responded to you, et cetera, et cetera. And there can be other such things like that, car accidents, falling off a bike, being in a boating accident, various things. And then, of course, there are inflicted traumas where you might have been abused, you might have been completely neglected to the point that it really affected your development. You could have witnessed something that was very traumatic. You could have been working, of course, in a job similar to me, where I was dealing with trauma every day. And what ends up happening is you get vicarious trauma. And then it turns into what is called compassion fatigue, where your heart has to start shutting off. It actually doesn't. You still pocket the trauma you were observing, but it somehow hides in your psyche, But on the front-facing part of it, it seems like sometimes people can feel like certain, let's say, nurses or police officers or 911 operators, etc., seem cold, or they seem distant, or they seem apathetic. No, the issue is likely that they care too much and they are really just working through vicarious trauma, and significant because, of course, they are literally immersed in it all day, every day. And then on top of that, of course, you can imagine with certain professions, the kind of trauma that they see that those of us that are not in those positions cannot even remotely comprehend. And so, as an aside, I hope that we are not judging people in those professions for those things, because they are really doing their best and they are exposed to things that we have truly no idea what they are exposed to. So, with that being said, a lot of the trauma I'm speaking of is from our childhood, but of course, it can happen by way of working with a boss that is a tyrant, working with a boss or a colleague that sexually harasses you and nobody listens to you or even blames you and accuses you of bringing it on yourself. There are just a myriad of examples, as you can imagine, where either prolonged chronic abuse or mistreatment can have us freeze, or an acute situation that is in a fleeting moment, almost it will seem, but it can completely change the trajectory of our life and who we are. And so each of us has our own response. And not all responses are predictable. There might be some responses where you might have had a fight response and other responses where you might have had a flight response, for example. A part of why we judge people at the scene of crimes, let's say someone is getting mugged in the city and there's just a bunch of people standing there. We judge it and say, oh, they're all standing there. Nobody helped this person when this burglar came and took someone's wallet from them. Well, most people freeze. That is a very common response. In fact, it is much more prevalent than the other responses. And so we can judge people or label it as the bystander effect, but it is not the bystander effect. It is trauma. In that moment, they are freezing, and they are likely freezing because that is their response. They have already been freezing when they were younger. Or maybe they just couldn't. Maybe you couldn't outrun your abuser. You had no choice but to just sit there and take it. And there's just or you might be in a car and you just see another car barreling towards you. You freeze. There's literally nothing you can do in that moment. It is past the point of pivoting. I say that metaphorically. There are a lot of scenarios that will happen, but the freeze response is very common. And the more trauma we have in our field, the more likely we are to freeze because it starts to compound. It becomes a very tangled ball of yarn, so to speak. It becomes a very heavy, wet blanket. And we know that when blankets get wet, they actually become quite heavy to lift. We might even need other people to help us lift them because the actual physical weight is so heavy. But freezing is a very legitimate and very common trauma response. And it can play out in business by way of knowing what you quote unquote should do. I know I should be marketing. I know I should be inviting people into my offers. I know I should be focused on income generating activities, but I'm not. And you might label it as avoidance. You might label it as procrastination. You might label it as self-sabotage. You see the issue with those labels. And we're going to go into those in future episodes. But I will tell you right now that procrastination and self-sabotage and quote unquote laziness, which will be another judgment, are all trauma responses. And so the judgment, of course, only serves to make it worse, so to speak. Already the trauma is being activated, and then we're judging it and mislabel it, by the way. And then, of course, on top of that, you're going to feel like you're chasing your tail because if you think it is mindset when it's actually trauma, it's not to knock mindset. It's just that we don't deal with trauma through mindset. We deal with trauma through trauma work. And so here you are perhaps investing in outward things thinking, oh, I just need an accountability coach. I need someone to motivate me. I need someone to hold me accountable. I need a drill sergeant. I need someone to tell me what to do. But you can still hire those people or go into those programs, and you're going to have little to no results if the trauma is still present, because you are addressing the wrong issue, of course, no fault of yours. You have been told that perhaps you have been in programs where they say, you are just lazy. Why aren't you doing the thing? Well, if someone is frozen, there's a reason. And so when it comes to client attraction, you might know exactly. In fact, you probably do. I mean, there's only so much strategy, we don't need to invest in more strategy. Investing in more of that isn't going to move the needle. And so the last thing you need is more strategy. You need to feel safe in taking the action. And so if you have compound trauma, if people have hurt you in the past, out of self-preservation, why would you let them in? But if you have been hurt by enough people, or have had such a traumatic experience with even one person only one time even in your life, that is enough to have you keep people at bay. And then the conundrum becomes, well, I really want to help people. And then you feel like a bad person, perhaps, because I want to help people. How come I'm not helping the people? And we go into this spiral. of judgment, which of course it is very hard to be motivated to do anything in judgment, isn't it? It is actually very demotivating. So that can be how it plays out. And in general, perhaps you keep saying you're going to go to networking events or host events, etc., and you freeze. Perhaps you keep saying you're going to do video or lives or whatever, and you freeze. Perhaps you are in the middle of projects and you freeze, you just abandon them. Maybe you have a lot of, I will say, partially executed projects or half-started projects. And yes, of course, that can be related to a lot of things. Certain personality tests, of course, will tell you that you're a quick start or you're not a quick start, or your human design tells you this, whatever. And of course, that is important. Of course, it is. And that information can be very helpful. But I really would like you to not overlook the trauma, because even in understanding your human design, it is not enough to just understand it. If you have trauma that is working against the design, then no amount of human design coaching is still going to move the needle. So all of the things that are going to allow you to make money, you will freeze in. And it's very common, by the way, to freeze after an income leap, where you feel like you were spent, where you feel like you were shell shocked, where you feel like you were just sitting and being, and your brain will tell you, oh, you're being lazy. Why can't you just get up and go? Why do you need to rest for so long in between income leaps? Well, you're recuperating because you're frozen, because it activated a trauma response again, because you're being asked to hold more and your nervous system is already taxed, and your nervous system can only hold the amount of money that it feels safe in doing. It can only hold the amount of money that it is regulated to hold. And so if your nervous system is almost completely fried, even if you have $1 million cash injection, it is likely going to bounce out of your field, or it is going to just have an immense amount of chaos in your business. Maybe your team blows up. Maybe your clients get mad at you. Maybe someone threatens to sue you. There are a lot of ways that this can play out. And so if you have not had clients come in for a while, or you feel like it is almost completely dried up, or you feel like you have been in an income plateau, frozen in an income plateau for longer than a few years. And on top of that, what happens is you end up having to work harder to maintain the same amount. Let's say you are making $1 million a year. It actually is, it requires even more effort year after year just to maintain seven figures. It is a strange phenomenon, but it is kind of true. So, but anyways, how it plays out in real time is that it freezes or almost completely dries up client flow, and or keeps you in a significant income flow, even of course when you are making good money. That is a really good indication when you are doing all of the things and things still are not moving, meaning that the needle hasn't really moved, the bus hasn't left the station, so to speak. That is a pretty good indication that you have some trauma at play, and likely some compound trauma if you are frozen, because that is the tipping point. When we don't deal with things when they are at the fight, flight, and fawn response, it tips over into freeze and seize. So what you can be assured of is that you're going to need someone that is highly skilled at that, because first of all, we don't need people blaming you and shaming you that you're just lazy or you're procrastinating or you're self-sabotaging. And please just listen to my self-sabotaging binaural beat meditation or whatever they might offer to give you. That might soothe you, that might be a band-aid, but it is not going to unfreeze you, because this is now compound. It is now significant, and it is not impossible. In fact, it is very quick and painless and permanent to dissolve it. Well, I will say, at least with the way that I do it, but you will really want to be mindful that you are not approaching this as, I just need another course, I need another strategy, I need to do more marketing, I need to buy more ads, I need to do more mindset work. It's not even frequency work, it is trauma work that is required. So if this is resonating with you, if this is giving you some insights, if this is bringing up some memories of, oh yes, I forgot about that, or I've been exerting a lot of energy to kind of keep that memory at bay, I highly recommend that you find someone that you can trust to shift this, because when you do, of course, it's pretty remarkable how quickly the client attraction faucet gets turned on again, how quickly the money faucet gets turned on. But then, of course, when you are not used to holding what I will just say playfully avalanches of clients flowing to your money, We don't want a kind of a secondary trauma response to result, right? And so that is why it's important to work with someone who is informed, who knows how to hold you through that successfully, so that you can stay in flow and so that you can keep going up and up and up. So if you would like to do that work together, of course, I am here to explore that with you. You're welcome to connect with me on the socials. You are welcome to email my team, clientcare@souljourneys.ca, and we can explore what I may have available to support you with this. And of course, I will love for you to keep listening to this series and ideally share it with your friends as well, who you feel may benefit, because this is very important work and often the missing piece in why CEOs are not getting the results that they will like, especially high achieving CEOs that are, of course, smart and savvy and are usually really good at figuring things out. That is the key, right? If you're doing all the right things and you feel like you're still trying to crack this code, it's not a code that you need to crack. It is just trauma that you need to dissolve. So thank you for being here with me. It has been my great honor to share this with you. I certainly hope it has served in some way. And I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening. Before you go, if you would like to have a chance to have your name and business featured on the Gold Standard podcast, hop on over to where you listen to this podcast and leave a review. If you're selected, you'll have your name and business featured on our show. And in the meantime, we wish you tons of financial blessings, and we'll see you soon for the next Making Millions transmission from Mother Malia.